My ex left our 6-year-old at Disney to have an adults-only trip. Then my phone rang. I was 2 states away in Chicago when my phone rang with a Florida number. I almost didn't pick up. I wish I could tell you I had a bad feeling, but I didn't. I answered it eating a sandwich in a hotel lobby. "Sir, this is Disney Guest Services. Your son is at our Lost and Found." I laughed. I actually laughed. I said there had to be a mistake. My son's at the park with his mom, and the woman on the phone went quiet for a second. Then she said, "He's been here 4 hours. 4 hours. Write that number down, because it's the whole story. 4 hours a 6-year-old sat on a bench by the teacups, asking every person in a costume where his mommy went. I called my ex. She picked up on the 5th ring, and I could hear ice in a glass. "Oh, Carter? He's fine. We're back at the pool. Kids get bored of rides anyway." I said, "You left him, alone, in a theme park." And she sighed. That sigh. Like I was the problem. "Relax, James. It's the safest place on earth. Paul just wanted to do the big rides without a kid whining. Builds character. We're not helicopter people like you. Builds character." She said that, about a 1st grader alone in a crowd of 40,000 strangers. Here's the part that saved me. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been posting all over Facebook about her child-free Disney getaway. Countdown photos, cocktails, captions about finally doing Disney the right way, no kids, no stress. She'd literally announced the plan. So while I was still on the phone with guest services, I started screenshotting every post, every timestamp, the bar check-ins during park hours. I sent the whole folder to my lawyer before I even hung up. Then I did the only thing I could do. I sat in that lobby and waited for a 6 a.m. flight, because every earlier one was booked, and I stared at a picture of my kid on my phone for 6 hours straight. The Disney lady stayed on with me longer than she had to. She said, "He keeps asking if you're mad at him. He thinks he did something wrong." That broke me. I told her, "Tell him Dad's coming. Tell him ice cream for breakfast." She said, "We already did." I landed in Orlando at 7 a.m., and my phone lit up before I was off the jet bridge. My lawyer, then the news, then my sister. Turns out leaving a 6-year-old alone at a park for 4 hours isn't just bad parenting in Florida. It's a felony. Deputies had gone to her hotel at 5 a.m. The story hit local news by noon. Her hospital saw it in a morning meeting. Nursing license. Suspended by lunch. Paul posted about media persecution. His firm let him go quietly. Karma moved faster than Space Mountain. But that's not the part that stays with me. I got to the Family Services Center, and there's my kid at a little table, syrup on his chin, showing Goofy something on his hands. He sees me and doesn't cry, doesn't run. He just holds up his shoes. "Dad, look, I can do the bunny ears now." The cast members had kept him overnight, fed him, let him sleep in a room done up like a castle. And at some point in the middle of the worst night of his little life, a stranger in a Goofy costume had knelt down on the floor and taught him to tie his own shoes. Because nobody else ever had. I asked him later, "Buddy, weren't you scared? All those hours by yourself?" And he looked at me confused, and he said, "I wasn't by myself, Dad." I said, "I know, the nice people stayed with you." He shook his head. "No, not them." He put down his fork. "The man who sat with me on the bench. He knew my name before I told him. He said he was a friend of Mommy's, and he said not to tell the costume people about him." I felt the whole room go cold. Because when I pulled the 4 hours of park security footage the next morning, to use in court, to prove she left him, there was my son on that bench by the teacups, sitting completely alone, talking to no one. I watched it 3 times, then a 4th. I kept waiting for a man to walk into frame and sit down. Nobody did. 4 hours of footage and my kid is alone the entire time, feet swinging off the bench, turning to talk to an empty space beside him, turning to the empty space, and smiling, and talking, nodding at nothing. Once he even scooted over on the bench, like he was making room. I told myself the obvious thing. He's 6. He was terrified and alone, and his brain gave him a friend to survive the afternoon. Kids do that. Imaginary friend. Coping. There's a whole chapter about it in the pamphlet the Disney counselor handed me. I read it in the parking lot. I wanted to believe it so bad my hands were shaking. But here's what I couldn't shake. The man knew his name before Carter told him. That was the detail. Write that one down too, because it's the whole rest of the story. Carter is very clear about it, and Carter is not a kid who embellishes. He's a literal little person. If you ask him how his day was, he tells you the temperature, and he said, plain as anything, the man already knew he was Carter, called him Carter first. An imaginary friend doesn't know your name before you do. I asked him to tell me about the man. What did he look like? And Carter thought about it the way he thinks about everything, seriously chewing his lip. He said the man was old, older than me, older than Grandpa even. He had a gray beard, kind of scratchy looking, and he was wearing a hat, a soft one, like a fisherman hat but not, a bucket hat, and a green jacket with a zipper that was broken, so it hung funny on one side, and Carter said the man smelled like peppermint, real specific, peppermint and something like a garage. I wrote all of it down in my phone, every word. I don't know why. I think part of me already knew where this was going, and part of me was fighting it with everything I had. Then Carter said the thing that made me put the phone down on the table. He said the man told him a joke. The man said, "Why did the golfer bring 2 pairs of pants?" And Carter said he didn't know, and the man said, "In case he got a hole in one." And Carter laughed and laughed, he told me, because it took him a minute to get it, and when he got it, he laughed so hard he almost fell off the bench. And the man laughed too and said, "That one always killed at the Union Hall." I felt the floor drop out from under me, because that's my father's joke. That exact joke, word for word, punchline and all. My dad told that joke at every barbecue, every holiday, every school pickup for my entire childhood, in case he got a hole in one. And when nobody laughed hard enough, he'd always say the same follow-up. That one killed at the Union Hall. He worked at the Union Hall, Pipefitters Local 47, for 31 years. My father died 4 years ago, 2 years before Carter was even born. Carter never met him. There are maybe 3 photos of my dad in the whole house, and none of them are out where a kid would study them. And in every single one of them, my father is not wearing a bucket hat, not wearing a green jacket. He's in a suit at a wedding and dress clothes at Christmas. Carter has no way to know what that man looked like in his everyday life. And Carter has no way, no possible way, to know that joke or the Union Hall line, because I have never told it. I can't. I've never been able to get through it without hearing his voice. I sat at that kitchen table, and I did what any sane person does. I tried to explain it away. My ex must have told him. My mother must have said something. He saw a photo I forgot about. I tore the house apart that night looking for a picture of my dad in a green jacket and a bucket hat, and I did not find one, because it does not exist, because my father hated hats. Used to say a man in a hat is hiding a bald spot or a bad idea. The peppermint, though, that's the one that put me on the kitchen floor. My father was a diabetic who wasn't supposed to have candy, so he sucked on sugar-free peppermints all day long, hundreds of them, his coat pockets rattled with the wrappers. My whole childhood smells like my dad's peppermint breath leaning down to check my homework. And the garage smell. He rebuilt carburetors on weekends. Of course he smelled like a garage. I didn't sleep. I sat in Carter's doorway watching him breathe until the sun came up. The next morning I asked him, careful, casual, pouring cereal like it was nothing, "Buddy, this friend on the bench, did he say anything else? Anything about me or mommy or grandpa?" And Carter, mouth full, not even looking up from his cartoons, said, "He said to tell you he was sorry he missed you. He said he waited but you were on the airplane." He crunched his cereal, and he said he's real proud of how you turned out, and he said to check the shoes. Check the shoes. I said, "What shoes, bud?" And Carter pointed his spoon at his sneakers by the door, the little light-up ones he'd worn to the park, the ones a stranger had knelt down and taught him to tie. I picked them up, I turned them over, and tucked down inside the right shoe, under the insole, folded into a tiny square, was a peppermint wrapper, sugar-free, the exact brand, the kind they don't even make anymore, the kind I hadn't seen in 4 years, the wax kind with the red stripe that my dad bought by the bag from the same drugstore for 30 years. I sat down on the floor of my hallway holding a candy wrapper, and I cried like I have not cried since the day we buried him. Now, I know how this sounds. Believe me, I have gone over every rational explanation 100 times, and I want to give them to you fair, because I promised myself I'd be honest about this, and not just sell you a ghost story. Maybe my ex, cruel as she is, planted the wrapper as some sick joke. Except she didn't know my dad, they never met, she wouldn't know the brand, and she'd been in a jail cell since 5 a.m. Maybe a random old man at the park was a diabetic who liked peppermints and happened to know a golf joke. Golf jokes are common, fine, but the Union Hall line, the green jacket, the being proud of how I turned out, my son turning to an empty bench for 4 hours on camera, talking, laughing, scooting over to make room. Here is the thing I keep coming back to. I keep asking the wrong question. I keep asking, was it real? Was it really him? But the question I can't get out of my head is the other one. My father was proud of how I turned out. Fine. But how did he know to come? How did he know his grandson, a boy he never met, was sitting alone and scared on a bench in a state my father never once visited in his whole life? Who called him? Who told him to come sit with a crying 6-year-old for 4 hours until the grown-ups showed up? I asked Carter that. I asked, Buddy, did the man say why he came? How he knew you were there? And Carter looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like I was slow. He said, Because I asked for him, Dad. I said, You asked for Grandpa? But you never met Grandpa. You don't even know Grandpa. And my 6-year-old son, my literal little boy who tells you the temperature when you ask how his day was, put down his spoon and said, Not that, Grandpa. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator. I said, What do you mean, not that, Grandpa? How many grandpas do you think you have? And he counted them on his fingers. Slow. The way he counts everything. There's Grandpa Rick. That's my ex's dad. And there's you, when you're old. That's a joke. That's not real. Okay. And there's the one in the pictures Mommy keeps in her special box. The one she talks to at night. She calls him Daddy and she cries. She said if I ever got real scared and lost, I should ask him, because he watches out for our family even though he went away. I stopped breathing. Because my ex's father, Grandpa Rick, is alive. He was at Disney. He was at the pool with the cocktails. He's one of the people who left my son on that bench. The man in Mommy's special box. The one she talks to at night, calls Daddy and cries over. That's her stepfather, the man who raised her from age 3, the man who died the winter before she and I ever met. So I only knew him from her stories and one framed photo she kept hidden in a shoebox because looking at it hurt too much. A man in a green work jacket with a broken zipper, a pipe fitter, a guy who sucked peppermints all day because of his sugar and rebuilt engines on the weekend and told the same terrible golf joke at every family thing until everyone groaned. The same joke as my father, the same jacket. The same peppermints, 2 different men, 2 grandfathers from 2 families that never met, who happened to be built out of all the same small, ordinary things, and I'd spent the whole night so sure it was mine that I never once considered it was hers. Carter never met either of them, but only one of them ever worked at a union hall, and I've never told Carter that word in his life, so I did the last thing, the thing I'd been too scared to do. I called my ex at the county facility, and for the first time since all of this I didn't yell. I just asked her one question. I asked, Did your stepdad, did he work anywhere with a union hall? And there was this long silence on the line. And then, real quiet, not slurred anymore, stone cold sober now, she said, How do you know that? I never told you that. He drove a forklift at the plant, the union halls where they had his funeral. Her voice cracked. James, why are you asking me this? Why are you asking me this right now? I looked over at Carter, tying his shoes on the floor by the door. Bunny ears. Won't do it any other way. Says that's how his friend taught him. And I didn't know how to tell her that while she was 3 cocktails deep abandoning our son to the safest place on earth, somebody showed up to sit on that bench for 4 hours. Just not anybody she'd left him with.